Hello everyone, and welcome back to Age of Noob. Today, we're doing something different, as I will do a summary review of the new Rise of Rome DLC that's coming for Age of Empires 2, and I'll also do a quick refresher on how AoE1 differs from AoE2 in a separate video linked below in case you haven't played the original. For those of you who haven't followed the news, the Rise of Rome DLC is essentially porting over AoE civs, units, and balance as a separate game mode into AoE2's engine. So here's a quick summary of all you AoE players out there. If you haven't played the original Age of Empires at all, then you will need to get accustomed to the old AoE civs and overall gameplay. Fret not though, as the basic premise, unsurprisingly, is pretty much the same. The buildings you construct are similar, the way you age up is similar, and the 4 main resources and how you collect them are also pretty much the same. As mentioned previously, check out the dedicated video linked below in the pinned comment after this video in case you want a refresher. Now, you may ask, if this is just an AoE1 port, then what's the point of this DLC then? Can't we just play AoE DE instead? Well, not quite, because there are some tweaks that were made that completely change the way the game is played, and no, I'm not exaggerating. First of all, you won't be running into performance issues here like you would in AoE DE. We're practically playing within Age of Empires 2 here, and the experience is just so much better on this engine versus the original's DE. I wish this wasn't the case, but it is. It's not even close. Apart from performance issues though, the devs have made some fundamental game design changes, so let's go through them. First, villagers can actually garrison inside town centers and towers now, whereas garrisoning was not even a thing in the original AoE, including its definitive edition. Second, gates are now also a building that you can construct which wasn't available before. These two alone will completely change the way economies and defenses are set up, as the game will definitely play closer to the way we play AoE2 than before. For example, playing the map Arena, which is called Citadel in Return of Rome, definitely felt weird at first, but did play out just fine. This is good news for AoE2 players, as their playstyle will fit in quite nicely, and AoE1 players will need some time to adjust. Purists, on the other hand, will definitely not like this. Third, military buildings can actually now produce units garrisoned within, just like AoE2, which basically means that you can set the building's waypoint into itself, and it will garrison its trained units inside until you decide to ungarrison them. Of course, you cannot garrison them back in. In fact, military units cannot be garrisoned at all, as the only thing they can enter are transport ships. And finally, the fourth change, and arguably the most important one, is, you guessed it, pathing and unit control. Pathing in the original AoE from 1997 was the type of stuff that made you want to punch your monitor and throw your mouse out the window.
Oh shit, here we go again.
It was, and it still is with its definitive edition, absolutely dreadful. I kid you not, controlling your army in AoE1 is actually worse than controlling a goddamn herd of sheep in AoE2. Not only does the concept of formations not exist entirely, but even without formations, the pathing of sheep is still smoother in AoE2 than actual trained soldiers in AoE1. The collision boxes also made things worse overall. It was pretty much the most important reason why I never bothered playing AoE1 all the way back when the first DE was released. The devs did mention that they wanted to keep the feel of the game the same back in 2017 prior to the release of AoE DE, and to their credit, they were kinda right. The aforementioned garrison changes, gates, and pathing changes that involve collision boxes, military micro, movement, and combat overall makes the game play extremely differently. It feels so smooth that I never felt like I was playing AoE1. And make no mistake, it is a very odd experience for OG AoE players like myself who grew up playing the original in the late 90s, as you'll need some time to get used to it. This is an old engine, and hiccups and bugs will occur here and there, no doubt, but the devs have done a fantastic job in my opinion, and you cannot compare AoE1 DE with the Rise of Rome DLC as it relates to the smoothness of controlling your units. And again, to reiterate, this pathing change is not only a user experience change, but very much a balanced one as well. The whole concept of archer mass and kiting, for example, will be introduced for the first time, at least at a larger scale, so I have no doubt in my mind that further balance changes will come between range and infantry units. Microing a mass of horse archers for the first time is truly something else. Quick interjection. As I was capturing footage for my voiceover, I noticed yet another massive change that I wasn't originally aware of, and it's the fact that markets can actually train trade carts in Return of Rome. I don't think I have to underline how much of another fundamental change this is, especially for team games now where gold will no longer be a finite resource. Yet again, this flips game balance and especially late game on its head, and is another reason why Return of Rome will be an intrinsically different experience. I'm glad I didn't miss this in my review, but let's get back to the rest of the video now. One other thing that I didn't like but understood is the terrain and all assets related to it. All terrain, trees, water, hills, and even berry bushes are from AoE2, which feels super weird to my eyes when juxtaposed with AoE1's buildings and units. I definitely prefer the look and feel of the OG assets, probably due to nostalgic reasons and how accustomed I've been to the way AoE1 looked all these years. It's definitely not a deal breaker, but there's barely any nostalgic factor here, as you should go into this expecting a new Frankenstein experience. Hence, going back to the previous point, not changing pathing, garrisoning, and gates in the original DE did in fact preserve the feel of the game, as that was how it was originally designed. Return of Rome, on the other hand, feels like Age of Empires 1.5, especially since all terrain assets are that of AoE2. The base game is still not as sophisticated as AoE2, but those 4 fundamental changes do make the game significantly more playable for the average RTS player in 2023. Also, a final addition that Return of Rome comes with that isn't in AoE DE is the brand new civilization, the Lac Viet, which is basically the Vietnamese. In case you don't know, Age of Empires 1 is absolutely massive in Vietnam, with the top streamer being viewed in the hundreds of thousands live. They all still play the CD version of Rise of Rome from 1998, likely due to how poorly AoE DE plays. This new Vietnamese Civ is definitely an homage to the Vietnamese community that kept the OG game alive. And, of course, a play from Microsoft to try to get that massive player base into AoE2 DE somehow. Okay, I have been able to playtest this DLC in its beta and pre-release now, and I have to say this. In a world where Return of Rome finally exists, Age of Empires Definitive Edition is basically useless now. The only reason why you might even consider playing 2018's AoE DE is if you want to play the original campaigns with remastered visuals, because they won't be ported over with Return of Rome. But honestly, if you want a kick of nostalgia, I'd personally play the CD version like the global Vietnamese AoE community. Maybe if you're a purist and want to play with the awful pathing and no garrisoning, perhaps that's your cup of tea as well. I could be wrong here, but of the 700 or so average players playing AoE DE daily today, I'd wager that most of them would simply transition over to Return of Rome. Even though it won't give them the AoE1 game feeling that they're used to, the quality of life changes are simply too good to pass on in my opinion. And this is even weird to say given that the 2018 release was meant to be the quote-unquote definitive edition. Return of Rome could very well be the Voobly and HD Exodus equivalent for Age of Empires 1. Regarding the AoE2 side of things, we do get a new civ called the Romans, and I think they look like a really fun civ to play with, and you should be familiar with some of the units if you've played the campaigns before. Unfortunately, we've been told that the Romans won't be available to play on Ranked for some reason, but I do have a feeling that the devs would reverse this decision if there is a community consensus to add them in. I see absolutely no reason why they'd be left out, as they play as your typical AoE2 civ would. And don't come to me with your timeline or historical accuracy BS arguments. The Huns existed in the game since the Conquerors, so if you're okay with the Huns being in the game, then you should be okay with Western Rome as well. Unfortunately, the devs didn't give us access to the new campaigns, so I cannot comment on those yet. Oh, and one final thing. AoE1 cheats are also ported over, and finally with brand new assets. The original DE didn't even bother updating those cheats, but Return of Rome does that and does it really well. Just look at these sweet rides. If you're curious for the full list of cheats, what they do and how they look like in play, then check out my new video linked below in the pinned comment. In summary, if you're a diehard AoE2 fan and mostly play multiplayer, then I'd say either wait for a big sale for this DLC or skip it altogether. Return of Rome is predominantly an AoE1 port into AoE2, so if you're not into that, it'll be a waste of money for you. If you are an AoE1 player or have played AoE1 in the past and liked it, definitely give this a try. It will feel like you're in some fever dream at first with elements of both games intertwined, but you'll get used to it soon and have a blast playing basically an extensive new game mode. Age of Empires 1.5 if I may. Overall, it's a great DLC that I think will be positively received by the community, and I really hope that we get to see some new tournaments played on the Return of Rome game mode. It would be a blast to watch for sure. Well, that wraps up my quick summary of the Return of Rome DLC that's coming soon to Age of Empires 2. It's still surreal to me that the game we loved 2 decades ago is still getting new content and support, and I'm super stoked to finally being able to play a modernized version of AoE1 that is actually functional and isn't riddled with problems. Kudos to the devs on this one. As always, thanks for watching everyone, be sure to subscribe if you have enjoyed this summary, and see you all in the next one.